Maximilien Robespierre, once a key figure in the French Revolution, met his tragic downfall on July 28, 1794, marking a pivotal moment in the revolutionary period. The fall of Robespierre is often seen as a dramatic shift in the course of the revolution, symbolizing the collapse of the Reign of Terror and the shift from radicalism to more moderate governance. His downfall was a combination of political miscalculations, growing opposition, and his failure to maintain the support of both his allies and the revolutionary populace. Maximilien Francois-Marie Isidore de Robespierre was born in 1758 in Arras, France, to a bourgeois family. He was educated in law and became a lawyer, gaining a reputation for his unyielding sense of justice and his commitment to defending the underprivileged. Robespierre was one of the most prominent leaders of the Jacobin Club, a radical political group that played a central role in the revolution. He was known for his uncompromising stance on revolutionary principles and his commitment to the ideals of virtue and the general will. Robespierre's rise to power coincided with the growing instability in France during the late 18th century. The revolution had begun in 1789, driven by dissatisfaction with the monarchy, economic hardship, and a desire for social and political change. By 1793, France was embroiled in a war with foreign monarchies and internal uprisings, and the revolutionaries faced a constant threat to their survival. This state of emergency led to the establishment of the Committee of Public Safety, CPS, which Robespierre would come to dominate. In the context of this crisis, Robespierre advocated for a policy of revolutionary justice, which included the use of terror to eliminate perceived enemies of the revolution. This policy was based on the idea that virtue and terror were necessary to safeguard the revolution and ensure its success. Under Robespierre's influence, the CPS oversaw the execution of thousands of individuals, including political opponents, perceived counter-revolution revolutionaries, and even former allies. The guillotine became the symbol of the Reign of Terror, and Robespierre's commitment to this policy made him one of the most feared men in France. However, by 1794, the political climate had begun to shift. Robespierre's dominance in the revolutionary government was challenged by growing opposition from various factions. One key source of opposition came from the more moderate members of the National Convention, who were increasingly concerned about the excesses of the terror and the concentration of power in the hands of the Committee of Public Safety. These moderates, led by figures such as Jean-Lambert Tallien and Paul Barras, began to see Robespierre as a threat to their own power and influence. Moreover, Robespierre's policies, particularly his purges of perceived enemies, had alienated many former allies. His emphasis on virtue and his uncompromising attitude towards dissent led to increasing paranoia and mistrust among the revolutionary leaders. Even within the Jacobin Club, dissent began to grow. Some of his closest allies, such as Georges Danton and Camille Desmoulins, were arrested and executed on his orders. These actions not only eliminated potential threats, but also sowed the seeds of discontent among those who had once supported him. The immediate trigger for Robespierre's fall was the speech he delivered on July 26, 1794. In this speech, Robespierre hinted at the existence of a conspiracy against him, suggesting that certain members of the convention were plotting to destroy the revolution. He called for the purification of the government and the removal of corrupt elements, but his speech was perceived by many as an attack on his political enemies. Robespierre's tone was increasingly dictatorial, and his rhetoric alienated even his supporters. Many members of the convention began to fear that they, too, would become victims of Robespierre's purge. On July 27, 1794, the convention acted decisively. A coalition of moderates, former allies, and disillusioned revolutionaries moved against Robespierre. The convention accused him of tyranny and corruption, declaring that he had violated the principles of the revolution. In a dramatic turn of events, Robespierre was arrested along with several of his closest allies. The next day, on July 28th, Robespierre and his supporters were executed by guillotine, marking the end of the Reign of Terror. Robespierre's fall was a result of multiple factors. His radicalism, his reliance on terror, and his refusal to compromise alienated both his political allies and the broader public. While he had been a champion of the revolutionary ideals of liberty and equality, His authoritarian methods, including the use of the guillotine, were increasingly seen as contradictory to those principles. His emphasis on virtue and moral purity, while appealing to some, was viewed as an imposition of his own ideological agenda on the revolution. The fall of Robespierre also marked a significant turning point in the French Revolution. It led to a shift in the political landscape of France as more moderate factions took control of the revolutionary government. The Thermidorian reaction, as this period of relative moderation came to be known, resulted in the dismantling of the institutions that had supported Robespierre's regime. The revolutionary government moved away from the use of terror, and many of the policies associated with the radical phase of the revolution were reversed. In the wake of Robespierre's execution, the revolution entered a new phase known as the Directory. The Directory was characterized by political instability and corruption as various factions competed for power. Although the extreme violence of the terror was over, the revolution was far from stable. The political climate remained volatile, and the revolutionary government struggled to maintain control over the country. Robespierre's fall did not end the revolution, but rather opened the door for new challenges to the ideals of the revolution. Robespierre's legacy is a subject of considerable debate. To some, he remains a martyr to the cause of the revolution, a man who sought to establish a just society but was undone by the very forces he sought to defeat. To others, he represents the dangers of radicalism and the potential for revolutionaries to become tyrants. His fall serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ideological purity and the concentration of power in the hands of a few individuals. While his political career ended in tragedy, the events surrounding his rise and fall had a lasting impact on the course of the French Revolution and the history of modern France. In conclusion, the fall of Robespierre was not just the end of a man, but the culmination of a broader political struggle that marked the complex and tumultuous history of the French Revolution. It was a moment of political reckoning, where the very ideals that had inspired the revolutionaries were put to the test. Robespierre's downfall, and the subsequent end of the Reign of Terror, signaled a shift away from radicalism and terror and the beginning of a new phase in the revolution. The legacy of his rise and fall continues to shape how we understand the complexities of revolutionary movements and the perils of political extremism.